Good evening, everyone. My name is Jake.
And I'm Russ.
Welcome to Shaper Sessions. Shaper Sessions every time.
Every time.
We have a fun one tonight. We are focusing on sign making.
Shine making.
Shine making.
With Shaper Studio.
Yes.
And Origin, of course.
Yep. Origin is a fantastic tool for the sign making trade, and it just got even better with the addition of Studio, and even easier with the addition of Studio. So we're going to talk about a couple of different ways you can do that.
Absolutely. As always for these shows, make sure to ask questions. We do a live Q&A at the end of every show. Ted's in the comments collecting those questions and saving all the really good ones for the end for us. So make sure you ask your questions as the show goes on. About halfway through, we'll pull up that poll question for our sessions giveaway. So stay tuned for that. And we've got a really special surprise mid-show for you today. Let's just say it involves winning a free Shaper Origin. So you're definitely going to want to stay tuned for that.
Right on. We have a whole ton of examples in front of us today. So we're going to show you a lot of things. We're going to talk about 50 different ways to make a sign. What else?
We're going to make a sign.
We're going to make a sign. Make adjustments to the sign thanks to Studio.
We're going to design the sign in Studio, start to finish, show you how we do all of that. But yeah, I think first off, it's a good time to start talking about just background information, like what are all the different ways to make a sign. Once you kind of have your head wrapped around all the different ways you can make a sign with Origin, then it's fun to start designing at that point.
At least the ones that we have found in our journeys here with Origin.
So I was thinking about this the other day, and I think that there are kind of three categories of signs. There are signs where you remove the letters, you cut them as negatives. There are signs where you make the letters as positives, and there are signs where you just engrave the outlines of things. How's that sound?
Perfect.
So, kind of start with that, and then you're going to want to add like color to your sign, right? Make
Usually.
it pop.
Yeah.
It's not really a sign without any contrast, right? So we've got all different kinds of ways that we've added color to signs. What do you have set up for here today, Jake?
This is a way that I tend to lean towards because it comes out so crisp. I am doing a shallow cut, about 1/8 of an inch deep, using something called Aura Mask, but any kind of paint block material, which is just like a big sticker on a roll. This brand is called Aura Mask, and we cut through that, basically masking everything off for us.
So let's show what that could look like.
Yeah.
This is the sign that we're going to be spending most of our time talking about today. This is one that we did for an imaginary coffee shop, Tom's Cafe. And the point where Jake is at right now is you've removed every bit of masking that would have covered the white areas, basically. Right?
Yeah.
And so that masking's removed. You just hit it with what? Spray paint?
I use spray paint. You could just use brush paint.
Milk paint?
Milk paint. And some of you may be thinking, why couldn't you just do this and sand it back? You absolutely could instead of using this Aura Mask. But what we found, especially with spray paint and things like that, it's so thin that it actually soaks into the wood, the pores of the wood, and it's a bear to sand out.
Especially with plywood, where you have to be really conscious of the layers.
Yep.
One thing that I love about Aura Mask, and we don't have the white parts painted for this part that we just started this afternoon, but one thing that I love about it also, though, is that you can start by cutting one color, you spray that color, then you can mask back over it, cut the second color, and then spray that color.
Yep.
So rather than, spraying the whole thing and then sanding away, it's way more difficult to practice that technique with sanding multiple colors, I would say.
Yeah, totally. There are a couple tricks to cutting this stuff that we will talk about as I get into it. But
I think this is like the next level.
yeah,
This is like Aura Mask plus
it.
level 2, right? So this has got all kinds of crazy techniques going on. This is not only an inlay, which is a great way to make shapes and letters and things like that. This is the state of California. It also has a little bit of metal in it. So thinking of ways to add color to things, you've got paint. Now we've added to our repertoire, we've added different colors of wood, and this is brass right here, which is really cool. We've done a couple shows on cutting brass before, especially the keyhole slots and plates show. We make a custom keyhole plate that you would put in the back of, like a picture or something even really way heavier. It could probably support. But we've got all kinds of information for cutting brass on that one, if you want to check that out.
What's fun, too, is all the examples that we're going to be showing today were designed with Studio. This one was like early days Studio.
Yeah.
When we needed a photo example. We're just like, okay, let's cut this.
All right. We've got more ways to add color. We've got ever controversial, but I think pretty solid for signs.
I would say
Epoxy.
the easiest.
Probably the easiest.
Yeah.
Very easy to mix your own colors with epoxy. Very, very weather resistant.
Totally.
And what's beautiful about this is that if you apply it carefully, you used a syringe for this, or did you just pour with caution?
I think I just poured. This was big enough to where I just poured. Any smaller, you start getting into syringe territory.
But you pour with caution, and it's self-leveling, which is really nice. There's kind of two ways to do it. One is where you go into the shape and the epoxy is kind of sunken a little bit, which
gives it kind of a nice...
gives it a really good texture.
Meniscus, I think.
Right. But another that we can show, epoxy, that we've done, is right up here, this filming in progress sign. And now this is really special because one thing about epoxy that you don't get with paint and that you don't get with, brass, obviously, is that it's transparent. So you can see the light coming out through that epoxy. We actually did a whole shape recession on this specific sign. So again, I'd recommend that you go watch that. But, the interesting technique that I took away from this was that it was actually mirrored. It was cast upside down.
Yeah.
Right? And so that gives you a really good, flat, bubble-free surface at the base. We still had to sand it down a little bit to get it perfectly flush, but that gets you a nice, smooth surface of epoxy at the front of your sign. Same for that one. We also had a different sign that we made that was actually Shaper Origin itself.
Oh, gosh.
That one was really cool.
Where did I put that?
It's lost. It's lost in the deep.
That was a fun one. But definitely sanding epoxy is the nice thing about this is there's no sanding required.
Right.
Like you get that nice shiny surface because it's a pour. If you pour proud, then you're sanding it back and then you're going through the grits. And if you want it to be like transparent, you're going pretty high.
Yeah, absolutely. Another cool material is plastics. So what is this, Jake? I think this is acrylic.
Just acrylics, yeah.
So this is another cool little Tom's Cafe idea that we had. Inlay some plastics in the shape of something cool, a little egg yolk there. And the O is actually the yolk of the egg. Great one. And then you can see that this was done first, and then it was masked over again. So we combined those techniques. And that got the edge of this inlay painted as well, which I think is really slick.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
All right, and speaking of epoxy that you sand flat, this was my other example. We've got
old altitude camp.
Where is altitude camp, Jake?
It's a fictitious place.
high in the sky.
Probably in the Sierra.
So I think that's let's see. All the ways to make signs by cutting negatives.
Yeah.
We've also got some shapes that are really cool to cut positives with. One example that I like here, it is a negative, but it's kind of two parts, and the negatives that actually added on top of the background, which is kind of the idea with the positives. This is a really cool material. This is called dye bond. And there are a lot of materials that are one color on the outside and a different color on the inside. This material, actually, the top one is black on the outside and black on the inside. But one way that you can use this is if you were to cut through this white on the background, for example, there's actually a core of black plastic in the middle. And I think it would be great to show this off on the bench cam.
Sure.
So people can see what's going on in there.
This is a common material in the sign making world because of its weather resistance. Ew. And we have these standoffs. So this whole thing was cut in reverse. And we actually cut the holes for the standoffs, and it all assembled really easily. But you can see that black plastic on the inside and a thin sheet of aluminum on the top.
All right, and one more bi-material kind of surface. This is HDPE, high density polyethylene. This stuff is called Color Core, and this is you could show it again on the bench cam. This is a layer of black on the outside, white on the inside, and then black on the other side again. And this comes in all sorts of colors. You can get it in red, blue, yellow, a bunch of different color combinations.
Think like ADA signage. It's that kind of
permanent caution signs,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And when you cut through that black skin layer, you reveal the color underneath, and that gives you your graphic, which is pretty slick. A lot of pocketing.
Funny thing to note with using HDPE that you'll run into if you want to use it. Tape doesn't like to stick to it very well.
This is a great pro tip.
It's like a very so it'll come with this kind of this sheet on top,
Protective sheet.
keep that on while you cut it because shaper tape's going to stick to that better than actual HDPE. If you don't have that, you might have to put like a stickier painter's tape or something down in order to get shaper tape to stick.
Or make a tape board.
Or make a
couple of
tape
pro
board.
tips, but if you leave this sheet on, I've had a lot of success
Yeah.
with that. Yes, I think those are all the ways that we had kind of set aside to make a sign. So, with all that in mind, I mean, let's cut to the chase here. We have 2 words that need to be engraved on this sign. You know, let's pull this one back out. This is our example for today. We've got
Buried.
Tom's Cafe. And so Jake's going to go ahead and cut this cafe portion now. We're going to go back in the second half of the show, show you how to design this entire sign in Shaper Studio. And then we're going to remix this. We're going to make it not Tom's Cafe. I think today we're going to make it Ned's Cafe. So we'll show you how to update designs, sync them directly to Origin, and then we'll cut this half after we've updated that on the computer.
Cool.
Okay.
And the cutters I will be using is our standard 1/4 inch upcut bit for my rough cut. The point there is to get all the chips out of the cut and get the bulk of the material up and out. And I'm going to come back in and do a finish pass with this, if you wouldn't mind showing that. There you go. That is an 1/8 inch down cutting bit. So all the forces are going down, and it's going to give us a nice clean edge on that aura mask. And that is really the trick to using this kind of stuff. Is if you want a clean edge, you need to use a down cutting bit only on the finish pass.
Yeah, you don't want that paint bleed under the edge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of it's slipping. Okay. Let me get into it.
Great. I'm going to step off to the side here so that don't blow out the microphone too much. Now, Jake, nod if you're starting with a pocket cut. All right, so that's a yes. Jake's going to clear out this whole area with a pocketing cut. You'll notice when he gets to the boundary of the pocketing cut that Origin actually doesn't allow him to get too close to the edge. That's on purpose. Pocketing leaves a nice little boundary area automatically. We call it pretty similar to kind of a roughing cut. You know, you do this pocketing cut, and then the idea is that that little bit of material that's left is just enough to remove and get a nice crisp edge, especially with this aura mask and the eventual 1/8 inch down cutting bit. This is a pretty complex shape, this cafe kind of script lettering, and this is one of the beautiful things about Shaper Studio is that it allows us to create these complex shapes, and then with Shapeshifter it allows us to choose what portions of that shape we want to cut and lump those in all together. So this script came in actually as a couple of different letters, but we were able to group it all into one cut, which is going to make this way faster and easier for Jake. Looked like an automatic retraction there, and that's really the cool thing about Origin, and that's why we build in that roughing offset for pocketing. It's so that you can work a little more fast and loose, really, and when you hit the edge of that corrective range, Origin automatically retracts, which saves your work. So in the middle of the pocketing zone, Origin acts basically just like a standard plunge router. I'm getting distracted here. I see something going on. We got a little tape movement or something?
Tape movement, or supposed tape movement, which I'm just going to add a strip of shaper tape.
Yeah, maybe we could remove any of the tape that's been like cut through.
Do we have a roll of shaper tape handy?
I'll get you one.
one of the many drawers.
You know, it wouldn't be a good show without a little bit of a mistake, but that's, you know, what's cool about that is you get to learn how we fix it.
Yeah.
Got a
Thank
little bit
you.
of shaper tape there.
I am starting to cut through a lot of my tape too, so it's not a bad idea to add to scan at this point.
And when I get to this point, if shaper tape is moving, this vinyl, this Aura mask is, you know, once it starts to peel up the corners a little bit, I find it to be a little bit useful to remove some of the tape that has been cut through that might not be needed anymore, the older tape. Yeah, a little extra tape never hurts. But that's the beauty of this, you know, in as many cases as possible, it prevents you from really messing up the work. We'd much rather retract and, you know, learn something and start again, or, you know, continue on rather than just plow ahead and screw up the whole sign, you know?
Okay, we should be good now.
Okay. So, yeah, definitely as you're cutting through tape like this, you are going to occasionally want to add some additional tape, and the add to scan button makes it really easy to add that tape and keep working. You know, another technique that we use sometimes when we're not trying to pre-cut a bunch of this just to show on the show is we'll start at the bottom and work our way forward. So as you cut, Origin's camera looks forward in front of you. So as you cut, the parts that you have cut are not the parts that the camera is looking at. So the parts that the camera is looking at forward haven't been cut yet. Kind of progressively move forward as we cut those shapes. But sometimes, you know, there's only so much you can do, and adding to scan is definitely a really useful technique to have in your back pocket. One thing you also are going to want to keep an eye on if you're cutting through a lot of tape is that tape meter in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. The tape meter ideally should be full, you know, and it'll show half health, partial health, quarter health, whatever. If you've cut through way too much tape, it'll start to flicker red. And when you get to that red point, that's when you're definitely going to want to add more tape in the camera's field of view so that Origin knows where it is. You know, the tape is how Origin knows where it is at any given time. And so if that tape meter starts to get red, then you're definitely going to want to add some tape. And sometimes I think it can just be really meditative to watch someone cutting. It's like watching someone play video games or play music almost. Getting right to the end of this first pass at the cafe lettering, starting with the pocket, and then as a reminder, especially important with this Aura mask, Jake's going to come in and do that finishing pass. But it's not just any old finishing pass, it's a finishing pass with the down cutting 1/8 inch router bit. The 1/8 inch part isn't especially important unless you're trying to fit in some really tight corners, but the down cutting bit is the particularly important part.
Yeah, in fact, I have a 1/4 inch down cutting bit here as well, just in case, but for this it doesn't matter. All right. Bingo, 1/8 inch.
Yeah, always remember to Z-touch, absolutely.
And we're going to cut that line right there.
Okay, and so we're on that finishing inside cut now, and what Origin is going to do is, as opposed to the pocketing cut where it acted pretty much like a plunge router, except when Jake ran up against one of the edges, now Origin is going to follow that line, always correcting, always automatically compensating for where Jake is in space. And as long as Jake keeps that dot inside the boundary circle, he's just going to be able to keep chugging along. If the dot reaches the edge of the circle, origin, again, is going to automatically retract and save that work, which is great. I think we're doing a nice shallow 1/8 inch cut for this. For paint, it doesn't really matter too much how deep you go. Paint is paint. The layer of paint is going to be, tenths of a millimeter thick. So, any depth is good for that. And going shallow saves you time cutting. The less material you're removing with origin, the faster you can move, and the easier it is to get a really good result. If this sign were 8 or 10 millimeters deep or something closer to a 1/2 inch, it would take a little bit more practice, frankly, to get a really good result. Not that, we do it all the time, but the deeper you go, the more material you're removing, the slower you're going to have to go. And so this 1/8 inch cut's making it a nice piece of cake. For more depth for something like epoxy, there's a bit of a trade-off there. Depth definitely can increase the richness of a transparent material like epoxy. But at the same time, epoxy is expensive, and so the deeper you cut, the more volume of epoxy you have to use to fill that space. So there's a trade-off there with the epoxy that you choose. Also remember, if you're using epoxy to fill big volumes in wood, that different epoxies are set for curing at different thicknesses. So, there will be really quick cure epoxies that could work for very shallow depths. But the deeper you go, as that epoxy cures, it's going to give off heat, and the more heat it gives off, the deeper it goes, the more heat it gives off, and so the slower you want that chemical formulation of the epoxy to cure. So this show in particular is not an epoxy show. We've done a couple in the past, but that is just the one thing to look out for. Make sure that the epoxy that you use, and there are a ton of them out on the market, matches the thickness of the sign that you want to make. All right, beautiful. We should definitely look at that on the overhead can, if possible. I don't think we set that up specifically for this show, but yeah, that looks pretty good.
Yeah.
There we go. Watch your noggin, Jake.
That
Classic.
was cutting large text like this feels like dancing with origin. It's just like very fluid. And this is like almost ready for paint. I'd come in with a sanding stick and just knock any fuzz loose and vacuum that out, but
it's pretty good.
The line is perfectly clean.
You want to rub maybe what do they call those for the thing that
A burnisher?
Yeah, burnisher, the thing that sets the vinyl down nice and smooth. I'm going to rub that over the edges one more time just to make sure that's nice and smooth, crisp details.
Yeah.
Looks pretty good, gotta say.
Sweet.
Good work. I know it can be taxing doing all that cutting on camera.
Oh, I loved it.
All right,
just gotta
good.
get in the zone.
Yeah, nice. We talked about the 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch both down cutting router bits. I want to talk about a couple more router bits that are really cool for sign making. We talked about brass earlier, that little brass inlay that Jake used on his still well crafted sign. The router bit that we use for that is an 1/8 inch, usually by 1/4 inch O-flute router bit.
Stubby, strong.
Yeah, all of those parts of that are important. O-flute, because it clears those brass chips really well. O-flute is a very specific type of single flute, one flute geometry for a router bit. So O-flute's important. 1/8 inch is important because the less material you're removing, the less you have to push against it. So I really like the 1/8 inch much better than a 1/4 inch for working with metals because you're pushing less material away. And then by 1/4 inch, which means that's a 1/4 inch cutting length, which really allows you, it gives you much more stiffness. So you'll notice actually in harder materials like brass and aluminum, soft metals, that the stiffness of the router bit has a big impact on the quality of your cuts. And so I really like the 1/4 inch length, which is stubbier than our standard 1/8 inch router bits. But it really, really, really helps. So that's one to keep in mind. I'm looking over at the sign over here. We really like 16th inch router bits for detail work.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
If you're working on a small sign, 1/8 inch is good. 1/16 of an inch really gives you crisp corners.
Yeah, and so much of the text and stuff we want to do, if it has any kind of
Like a serif.
thank you, you're going to need a tiny bit to get into that little transition point, and it looks really crisp. A 1/16 of an inch, you'd be like, it looks like a sharp point if you take a step back.
Yeah, and there's something about bigger signs compared to smaller signs, too. The smaller the sign, the more important those small router bits are going to be. And then the last one I have written down over here is like beading bits or different styles of engraving bit. Those can be really cool for adding little details and textures to your work.
Point cutting beading bit. It's got a couple different names. But
as always with Origin, make sure that you do not use any bits with bearings. So if you look for a round over bit rather than a beading bit, you're likely to find bits with bearings. Don't use those.
Yep.
Okay, that's a lot of information. We're going to take our mid-show break. That is shop tour, announcements, giveaway, poll, all that good stuff. Let's start with the shop tour. The shop tour is from Evan Hollander. He sent this one a while ago. Thank you for your patience. We're just getting around to it, but we're really excited to show it. This is a really cool and densely packed shop.
I love it. So
let's pull that up. And Evan sent a nice email that I will read while it's playing.
This shop reminds me, like, it feels like if I had a proper home shop, like it would one day look like this. Just every space is utilized in a really great way.
Yeah, here we go. All right. Hi, Jake, Russ, Goose, Sam, Noah, and Ned now. This email was pre-Ned. I've had my Shaper Origin for a while now and absolutely love it. I can't thank you all enough for doing the Shaper sessions. I rarely miss an episode. I look forward to each and every one. You mentioned sending you a video tour of our shops on a previous Shaper session, and I saw last week you aired the first one. I did a quick video of my shop, and he sent it via Dropbox, which is very nice. Good for big files. Try Dropbox. I am a software developer and electrical engineer on the cusp of retiring and looking forward to having more time to play in my shop. I enjoy both woodworking and electronics as hobbies and have my shop split between my basement and my garage. Out in the garage, I have my table and miter saws, my drum sander, and large spray equipment. In the basement, I have a woodworking area and an electronics CNC area. So I think we're getting into the electronic area now.
Oh, so cool.
I filmed the basement shop for the tour video. The tour starts in my woodworking area where I have all my hardware, screws, hinges, and such, and a bunch of red Milwaukee pack-out boxes. The Shaper workstation is on the bench straight ahead. I also have a router table, disc, belt sander, dust extractor, and bandsaw in this area. There are a couple of Festool MFT workbenches in the middle for cutting and assembly. On the wall adjacent to the staircase, I have all my clamps and my hand plane cabinet. On the other side is my electronics work area, followed by where the desktop CNC machines are at. So desktop CNC machines, super cool. Kind of different applications for Origin, but definitely cool for sign making. And, one thing that I'll note is that Shaper Studio works to create files for a lot of CNC machines that are out there as well. If your CNC machine takes SVG files, there's one, for example, that looks like an X-Carve. You can use Shaper Studio to make files for your CNC machine, laser cutter, vinyl cutter, etc. That's an aside from me. Okay, back to the email. There's a drill press, small spray booth at the back, and another workbench. As you round the corner, there's a cabinet of router bits, my pliers and wrench rack, and the larger of the two desktop CNCs. There are another two benches for electronic work, followed by a small belt, disc sander, and scroll saw. Then, at the back wall, I could have swore we've gone through all the walls at this point. This is like an 8-walled basement. Then at the back wall is a cabinet I use for chemical storage, and to the left of that are my wire storage rack and some electronic component storage. And now, I also tacked on a video of a lamp I made for my niece at the end of the shop tour. I love this. This is really cool. This is Russ speaking. Back to the email. The base of the lamp has a number of precision cut holes that I didn't have drill bits for and used the Shaper Origin to machine.
Best hole cutting machine in the business.
Yeah, aside from Russ and Jake here, we love Shaper Origin for cutting just weird sized holes, like a hole in a countertop for a soap dispenser, whatever, you name it. Cut a hole with Origin. The lighting is all provided by LED based lamps and a number of RGB LEDs under the tubes and behind the big lens. All the electronics that control the lamp were designed by me. Thanks again. I hope you guys enjoy the shop tour. If you decide you're going to air it, please let me know. All the best, Evan Hollander. Incredible, Evan.
Thing is sick.
This is wild. Got a little meter there. Yeah, I love this.
I love that the juxtaposition of a electronics bench adjacent to a plane cabinet. Mm-hmm. It's just like a really cool image.
Yeah, I had to watch this video like 5 times to really feel like I got the whole detail. And a little Easter egg for anybody who goes back and watches this video, Goose is actually in it. Goose is in the video. So for everybody's been asking to see Goose. We just played him. You may or may not have noticed, but he's in there. So go back and watch that on YouTube later. Thank you, Evan, for sending a shop tour. We're going to send you our new 8mm by 35mm roughing router bit, which we just released a couple of weeks ago. I love it. It takes some really crazy cuts in hardwoods, plywood, MDF, etc. And for everyone who's out there watching live and later direct on YouTube, please send us videos of your shop to sessions@shapertools.com. Everyone we play, we'll send a little something to. Don't know what it's going to be, kind of whatever we're feeling that week, but it's always something good. Okay.
Cool. Thank you,
That's
Evan.
that one. Jake, let's talk about a giveaway.
What do you got to do to get a giveaway?
Answer the poll question. So Ned is going to pull the poll question up on your screen. We know it blocks the screen. We're practicing not talking about things that require visual presentation while we show the poll question.
We're learning. We're growing.
So the poll question this week is just what topic should we cover next on Shaper Sessions?
Yep.
We're doing this sign making show because people asked, hey guys, you haven't done a sign making show in a while. I bought my Shaper Origin to make signs, or I'm interested in making signs with the Shaper Origin. So thanks for that feedback. We love that feedback. Just let us know what we should do next on Shaper Sessions. And last announcement, but not least, this is the big one. Do you want to win a Shaper Origin?
Yes.
Do you have a Shaper Origin, and if you don't want to win a Shaper Origin, would like to win the equivalent value in Festool tools?
Yes.
All right. If you are either of those people, if you want to win a Shaper Origin, or if you have one and you want to win some Festool gear, we've got a great contest going. We have the Shaper Studio Design Challenge, which is another reason why we wanted to do a studio show today.
Yeah.
So,
similar format to the box challenge we did a little while back. Mm-hmm. We want to see what y'all got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Submit designs. I mean, ideally, we love seeing completed projects that were designed using Shaper Studio. But if all you have is a design that you can't realize, something's better than nothing.
It's okay.
First place wins a Shaper Origin. Second place is 2 free years of fully featured Shaper Studio. Third prize is 1 free year. And everyone who participates gets 50% off of a 1-year Shaper Studio subscription, which is pretty big.
Our judging criterias are creative use of Shapeshifter, which is our shape combining tool within Studio. Fabrication, again, not totally necessary, but certainly helps. And thirdly, quality of documentation. We want to see how you got to this beautiful design. Show us your creative uses of all those things.
Mm-hmm. And to submit, you are going to post that project with the hashtag Shaper Studio on social media. We like Instagram the best, personally, so I'd suggest that.
Yeah. And tag us at
Shape Tools, so that we're sure that we see it. Yeah. What else? Just a couple notes on Studio. 2-week free trial of fully featured studio for everyone. 2-week free trial, no credit card required. Studio Lite is free always, and so there's really no excuse to try it. You know, you got nothing to lose.
Everybody
You've got everything to win,
but
nothing to lose. And speaking of everyone can participate, no, you do not need a Shaper Origin to participate. Studio is great for working with laser cutters, vinyl cutters,
all kinds of stuff,
other CNC machines, like I mentioned. So if you're watching the show and you don't have an Origin, but you have access to a laser cutter, maybe at a makerspace or a library, then make a sweet laser cutter project. We would love to see it.
Yeah.
That's that.
That'd be great.
More details at shapertools.com/studio design challenge, and Ted will put a link to that in the comments. Okay.
Tell your friends.
Tell your friends too. Yeah, please. Speaking of studio, let's make this sign. What do you think, Jake?
I think we're ready for it.
Okay, great. I've got Shaper Studio pulled up here on my laptop. Here we go. There we go. I think that's up. I just undid a bunch of work because I practiced building this at earlier in the afternoon. So maybe you saw the spoiler of what we're going to be making, or maybe not. But basically, we're doing this Tom's Cafe. And actually, let me switch over to my recents. So this is kind of what we're going for eventually. Let's just give this some context. This is a studio design, Tom's Cafe. I'm going to show you how to build this in studio. More or less. I don't have exactly all the dimensions, but we're going to do our best. So let's go back to Tom's Cafe 2. We're going to start again. Now, there are 2 main shapes in this, and I did not draw that coffee mug. I used Find Art. There are a couple different ways to make shapes in Studio. There's Find Art. You can literally draw a shape with Make Shape. You can add text, or you can import an existing SVG file or DXF file. But for this, we're going to Find Art. And now we want a coffee cup. I just searched for coffee here. This is already up because I searched for it earlier. I really like this kind of 3-dimensional cup here for this sign. So all we're going to do is click on that, and that automatically adds that to the canvas. Now, how did you make that kind of swoopy sign shape? Well, I didn't draw that either. I found that as well just by searching for sign. Now, might have to scroll a little bit, and we might also have to, Jake, this is the one thing that we were hoping wouldn't happen, is that the shape didn't come up again.
Mm-hmm.
But we will, we can either pick a new one, or what do you say we actually just draw something that looks nice? Sure. So we can draw that shape with kind of a rectangle. I want to just drag this rectangle around and make it kind of tasteful. You can also use the arrow keys to bump that around in kind of a small way. And I know that I'm working at 1.5 inches across right now. I'm just kind of making this design approximately the shape that I want, and then I'm going to scale it up. So I'm going to make that just a little bit bigger, bump that down a little more, and I'm going to do something cool that I've seen on a lot of signs, which is kind of subtract a little bit from these corners. So I'm going to take that circle, I'm going to duplicate that a couple of times, and now you can see the circle is snapping to, didn't want to rotate that, but it's a circle, so it doesn't matter, snapping to the corner of my rectangle. And as soon as I shapeshift this, you are going to see kind of a classic sign shape emerge.
Kind of postage stamp-esque.
Mm-hmm. Postage stamp-esque. Exactly. That's what I'm going for. So I'm actually going to select all and remove the shapes that I don't want. Sometimes that's easier. I'm also going to keep existing shapes, so I keep all of the detail of that coffee mug. I'm going to make that shape. There we go. And I'm going to go back in. And since I kept all the shapes, but I want to get rid of a few of them, I'm going to delete the shapes that I no longer need.
Beautiful.
So we've got this mug. We've got this nice rectangular kind of sign shape going on down here.
And the important part, it's all one. You have one bounding
It's
shape
all
now.
one, exactly. If I click that, it's all highlighted. Now I'm going to have a couple of kind of duplicate shapes going on with the mug, but we can again do some kind of careful shape shifting to fix that. So for example, let's blow this up to full size. We're going to link those dimensions. And what width do we want this sign to be, Jake?
24 inches.
24 inches. Nice and big. There we go. So the reason that width is important is so that when we go to plan mode, all of this looks realistic. And we can click, oh, you know what I did? I think I didn't shapeshift it all together, actually, but we can always go back in, and I have just this shape separate. I'm going to shapeshift again. I'm going to keep all the shapes. I'm going to select all the shapes, and this is going to give me my complete outline. There we go. Now, if I select this, oh, you know what it is? It's behind the mug. Haha, that's tricky. But if I make that an outside cut, you can see now, it's because this is such a small bit diameter, you can see that this is going all around the outline of that entire sign. That's clever. Now, review mode is really handy. We usually work from design to plan to review, but then back and forth a couple of times. Review is pretty handy because before you commit to cutting wood, it's going to show me what this sign is actually going to look like. And now you can see that where in the sign that Jake and I made, let's go back to this main camera here for a big example. In this sign, this entire portion here is painted white, right? Now, if we go back to the computer, this portion is not cut away right now. It's a couple of online cuts or inside cuts, but very linear. So we need to go back into plan, but these are two separate shapes right here, so I can't make this just one pocket. If I set this to a pocket cut, it blows out actually the entire thing, which is not what I want. This is another really handy case for shapeshifter. So, okay, I want that right where it is. Now, this might be kind of tricky to select. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to select that whole mug. We're going to shapeshift just this bit. Now, we're still going to keep shapes so that I can do more manipulations to this, but we're going to make that shape. We're going to go back into plan mode. We're going to change this. Let's not use that. Now look at this. These two shapes have been combined with shapeshifter. We can change that to a pocket cut. And if we go into review mode, then that looks exactly how we want, which is really slick. So now I'm not going to go in and shapeshift everything because there are a lot of lines in this one. But what we do want to do is add some text. So we've found art. We've made some shapes and shapeshifted them. Now let's add some text. So we want this to say, Ned's Cafe, but we want those to be two separate words. One's going to go in the mug, and the other one is going to go in the sign portion. We used the Pacifica font for this, Pacifico. There we go. So Ned's, and let's actually just drag this off to the side here. Now we're going to have to shapeshift this all together. Let's do shapeshifter. And what this is going to do is going to connect these shapes, get rid of these little islands that are in the middle. So that's going to look like nice, cleaned up script now. We can move this back in. That's a pretty nice, nice dimensions on that, I think.
Yeah.
And then we'll add also cafe. Let's make this, let's see how 12 inches wide looks. Back to Pacifico. There we go. Bring this over here. Shapeshift that, and actually let me show you what this looks like without shapeshifter. So maybe I'll set this to a pocket cut. See how that pocket cut is covering the entire letter A, right? That's not what we want. We want those islands to be separated, and we want all of the shapes to act as if they're working together. So we'll select all of that. Get rid of those islands again. Make that shape. It's like we missed that letter C. Let's make that shape again. There we go. And then, move this over. That's a little bit big, so it's really easy. We're just going to link those dimensions back together. And let's make that a little bit smaller so that fits right there. Very cool. Ned's Cafe. So the last but not least way of remixing files is with this file import button. And so what we're going to do is change the Tom's Cafe file to Ned's Cafe, the file that Jake used earlier. He actually sent to me, and I have that here in a recent design. This was just uploaded with the SVG importer, and this is that classic Tom's Cafe sign that we've been working with throughout the show. All we're going to do is replace Tom's with Ned's. This is how easy it is to edit and change files with Shaper Studio. So we're going to bring Tom's over here. That's been shape shifted into a standalone shape. I got a couple extras over here too. This is from me messing around before the show. We're going to get rid of these, but we know what font we used. Again, we're going to go back in and say Ned's Cafe. What do we make that? 8 inches wide. That's pretty good. We'll make that Pacifico again so that it matches. We're going to shape shift that by selecting all and getting rid of the shapes that we don't want. Make shape. Love that. And bring that right into place. Now that's a little bit big, I'm going to say. So let's make that 7. Oop. And you want to make sure that you link those dimensions so that it stays proportionate. 7 inches. There we go. Nice and centered. That's great. Now, okay, here's the really cool part. This is saved as Tom's Cafe. It's automatically synchronized through Shaper Hub to Origin. And so what's going to happen here is, you know what, let's go in here and make sure that this is planned out as a pocket cut, actually, lastly. There we go, pocket cut. That's ready to go. We can see in review mode that this looks all good. Does that look good to you, Jake?
Perfect.
Cool. Now, again, this is always synchronizing. So it's always synchronized. And we can go over to Origin now, and that file is ready to be imported.
Design. Boom. Ned's Cafe.
Yeah, Ned's Cafe regular, not Ned's Cafe 2. I think that's the one you got. Perfect.
And go into 0.5, 0.5. Little pro tip here. We made a grid on this thing. Even though I'm just cutting it out of a piece of ply and I don't actually need the grid, we knew that we were going to potentially need to replace it. Hence the grid and making it super easy to place. All right, highlight Tom's and remove. There we go.
Great. So we've got a good bit of pocketing to do.
Let's see if I can get away with an inside cut. Yeah.
Yeah? All right. Go for it.
All right.
All Z-touched and everything?
Just...
Never hurts to double check.
It's like saying, did you lock the door?
Yeah, right.
You got to check.
Got your keys?
All right, here we go.
Now, usually on this show, we recommend starting with a roughing pass and then going to a finishing pass. I think Jake is going straight to the finishing pass on this one. He's shaking his head. Is that a roughing pass? If it's a roughing pass, nod your head. Okay, we are doing a roughing pass still. But, when you're taking really shallow cuts like this, a lot of the time I go even straight to the finishing pass. Because when you're only taking an 1/8 inch of a material, it's really not that much, even with a 1/4 inch router bit. And it's really easy to get really good results. So, try a couple of different things, and if you get something out of that could speed up your workflow, especially with signs where the depth isn't that important, I say there's nothing wrong with that at all. For really important fit ups and for things where you're taking a lot more depth and width of material out, like mortise and tenons, I would definitely say stick with that suggested process of roughing pass first and then finishing pass second. Got a couple little segments on this to go through, but the quick tap of the retract button and a quick tap of the plunge button makes connecting those shapes nice and easy. And holding down the green button for auto mode, or even double tapping the green button when you plunge for auto lock, can also help you get nice, fast, smooth results with really crisp corners in signs. I use auto lock.
Where did I put? There it is.
We got too many bits.
I know.
No such thing.
And
they said
the bits from last show stay here. It just piles on. Okay. 1/8 inch down cutting bit back in. You probably... Oops. Cancel. You probably saw that I wasn't able to get all the way in some of those areas with the 1/4 inch bit. So I am going to be making a fresh cut with a down cutting bit. I'm just going to be really cautious not to hang out in those areas, because again, we're just pushing all that debris into the cut. So I'll be nice and steady going through those.
Yeah, that's the trade-off there. So the down cutting bit really does a great job of keeping that vinyl mask pressed down against the crisp edge that you want for that sign, but it's also pressing all of that sawdust or all of that plastic waste, if you're working with HDPE, all of those chips down into the cut, which causes a lot of friction when all those chips build up and the router bit's trying to make room for itself. So you have to be cautious with plastics that you don't melt things. You have to be cautious for wood that you don't start a fire. Down cutting router bits are definitely an intermediate to advanced router bit to use, but when the application is right, there's really no replacing it. I also really love down cutting router bits for really thin commercial veneers. We did a show with Ramon Valdez months ago, last year probably at this point, about cutting inlay and marquetry with Origin using super thin 1/42 of an inch commercial veneers. And the veneers are very delicate. They're kind of difficult to stick to a tape board to use. Ramon developed a really great method using spray adhesive to hold that stuff in place, but a down cutting router bit especially will help keep that veneer stuck in place, but only as long as that veneer isn't too thick, because when you're only taking a shallow cut, there's not much material that you're really pushing into the cut. When you're taking a thicker cut, then you're definitely trying to push a lot more waste sawdust into the cut with that down cutting router bit, and it can be hard to manage and or dangerous. But really love down cutting bits, especially really small ones like a 1/16 of an inch for inlay and marquetry. Jake's just cruising along here. Again, the beauty of Origin is that it auto corrects for you as you go. So even with these complicated letters that would be difficult, if not impossible, to do freehand, that digital template is keeping you on track. And let's switch to that overhead cam and see the results.
Yeehaw. All right. Ned's Cafe. I still got nice clean lines on the Aura mask because of that down cutting bit. Once you peel the shaper tape away, it kind of reveals how clean the Aura mask is. But yeah, we're good. Might have to put a little bit more there and there. I have noticed that with this horror mask, it helps to do a light sand on your material first, so it sticks a little better. It is a pretty sticky material, but this was like rough ply. Should have hit it with some sandpaper.
Mm-hmm.
I've also noticed that it is sticky enough to tear some grain up on certain
Especially
species.
with certain plywoods.
Yeah,
right?
plywoods especially. Not so much a worry if you're using hardwoods. I didn't see.
Mm-hmm.
But
just something to be a little careful of.
yeah.
You can see we obviously get pretty good results with it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Right
a show. For everyone who's watching on demand, make sure to tune in live next time for live Q&A and giveaways. So tune in. See you in 2 weeks.
See ya.